Hi guys, my name is James Gillett and I'm the Managing Director for Redemption Inc. And today I'm going to do a video describing some of the techniques I've learned around building self-confidence and building my self-esteem and self-confidence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through mind, body and soul, talking about the different areas and how to do that, and like how to work on those particular areas to actually increase your self-esteem and self-confidence. But first I'm going to talk about fear and how to manage it, because you have to learn how to manage fear. A lot of people let fear control them, but it's actually one of the foundations behind building self-esteem and confidence, so you need to learn how to work with it. And obviously, so I'm going to touch on this afterwards as well, but body and soul first, and then the mind, and I'll explain why throughout this video. Anyway, I hope you get some value out of what I have to say. Alright, so fear. So fear is something that it controls a lot of people, and it will keep people in real bad places. For me, it controlled my life for a very long period of time, and every time I've had to lean into something, I've gone into the unknown, there's been fear attached to it. I had that when I went into prison, like I remember coming in, like I was holding a front when I first came in when I was 18, but there was a lot of fear attached to, going into that environment. And then after a period of time, it became normalised. And then there was a fear attached to coming out because you didn't know how to manage your life because you've been in such a survival type environment. So when I was released from prison after coming out, I went into the workforce as a labourer in rail. And that was like my dream job, like working FIFO, making money and everything I thought I'd wanted in prison, but I had a lot of fear and discomfort, and I felt like I was a fraud doing something that was good for me, which was such a weird sensation and feeling, considering that's all I wanted the whole time I was in prison. But that was a similar process. I had a period of time where I had to just override that extreme discomfort, and then it became the new norm. And I went through it again when I became a welder, and then even when I went into white collar and I became a lecturer at North Metropolitan TAFE. But I'd had enough experiences to understand how to utilise fear to be able to build myself up. The main point being there is that every time you start something new, it's natural that it's going to feel uncomfortable, and you're naturally not going to be very good at it to start off with. And that's just the discomfort is your brain just trying to restructure and learn how to understand this new system that you're pretty much operating from. There's another thing I want to touch on as well, is that when you come out of like a survival type environment, you have to be able to manage things like envy or jealousy or people's self-doubts, because when people see other people succeed, and it's almost like a natural thing for them to either be critical of it or to put blame on it, saying, there's a really good saying, I think David Goggins says, he goes, you'll never meet a hater doing better than you, and that's the truest thing, so I've always kept that in mind. So if I ever feel myself getting envy or jealous, I'll be thinking, well, why is it, like, how come I've given this power over to that person? And then that's something that I have to then work through. It's an internal thing. The point is, the main thing is you have to lean into fear, and you also have to understand that when it comes with fear, so if you're ever going to do anything that's good for yourself, if you ever want to do anything that breaks you out of a bad habit or a pattern that you're stuck in, it takes courage to break out of the fear. The world, so you have to face that fear, and it takes a lot of courage to go into the fear of the unknown, not knowing what the outcome will be. So it's a real thing, and you have to sort of understand that process. You have to be consciously aware of it, because otherwise what happens is people think that it's not for them, or if their self-esteem's low, they will use their mind to justify it. Like they'll always self-sabotage. I used to self-sabotage a lot. And that's something you've got to be really careful of. So I'll move into the other part, which is I'll go through the mind, body and soul. So obviously with the mind, take ownership and avoid blame. So wherever you possibly can, any situation that goes wrong, wherever you can, and I know a lot of the times there's two different sides. So there's, always, it's easy to pass blame on, but you don't learn lessons unless you take ownership of a situation. When you pass the blame on, it just means that you're not holding responsibility or accountability for it. Blame is the mind's way of making sense of things that we don't understand. So when people have like a low self-esteem, or they're coming from like a lower energy field, the mind will just interpret information in a way that's in line with where they are. But the problem with that is that usually pulls you down. So you need to override that, which I will touch on a bit more. But that's why I've said that, mind is the last out of the three that you really want to, it's important, but the other two are very important as well. But a few other things I'll touch on with the mind is, spoken about, if something doesn't go your way, look for how you can improve, and that you do that through educating yourself. So whether that be if a work situation, or if you're in a toxic workplace, toxic relationship, whatever it may be, look at how, like analyze it, like look back through it, like ask yourself, work out what you did well and what you liked about it, and then start to work out what was wrong about it and what you could put in place, or what you could do further reading so that you can avoid it happening again in the future. History. So this is a really good one. So people think I know this day and age, social media day and age, people don't like to learn or educate themselves. But if you study history with an open mind, you look for similarities between past events and current events, and you can even compare it to your own experiences. That way you can, you have a bit of a clearer idea, because life is all about patterns. Anyone that's even looked into, if you read history, or if you look at you go back as far as Stoicism, or even the things that are in religious texts, like these are written thousands of years ago and they apply today. So yeah, all that tells me is that human nature is still the same. It's just that the environments are different. Cultivate an open mindset. So like an open mindset is like, people like to just defend their ideas. I've had this when I've even gone into my space I'm going into now, like, you go into certain places and people go, there's a level of arrogance that comes with being intellectual. So it's almost like, if they've got a PhD, if they're running something, whatever it may be, there's a lot of rigid thinking where they just think, well, this is what I think, this is what I've written my papers on, but they don't actually, their mind is closed off to alternative ways or alternative ideas of doing things. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts I've had, is always just to remain curious. Curiosity is the way to have an open mind. Just be curious. Don't dismiss or judge anything. If something is against your way of thinking, it's like, it could be a learning opportunity for you, which then increases your knowledge, rather than you just just cutting it off. And a good way of being able to work out where that sort of sits is ask yourself, well, does this person know what they're talking about? Have they had the experiences? What are they, is there something about what they're saying that would make sense? Reprogram your mind. This is another good one for your mind as well. This sort of links in a bit with the soul, which is like meditations and stuff like that. So, or hypnosis. Like every night I do a sleep hypnosis, whatever the issue might be that I'm looking at overcoming, I'll try and do a hypnosis, because 95% of our what we do from our mind is coming from our subconscious mind. So even if our 5% is like, we want a better life, but our whole brain is wired to keep destroying our lives, all it does is just break our self-esteem down and our confidence down. That's basically what I'm going to touch on with the mind for now, and I'll move on to the body. So the body, the first thing I want to say about the body is, don't have all your value tied to your appearance. So I'll use myself as an example. So when I was in prison, I was the fittest I'd ever been. Like, I had my abs showing, I was like super fit, but I wasn't confident in myself because of the fact all my value was just tied to how I looked. So that meant that my day would depend, I'd wake up in the morning to see how much definition I got, and it became like a point of obsession. I was working at the gym, Cash Arena, so I was training up to 6 hours a day, like ultra fit. But now I've got a bit of weight on me, I've got, I'm far from like what you would call a health specimen, but I work out regularly, I exercise regularly, and I do that because that also elevates my vibration. So when I do something healthy, especially when it comes to working out, it boosts my mood, elevates my vibration, which is really important. And there's two things I want to touch on, especially with the body. If you want to start like an exercise type thing or a diet or whatever it may be, you have to focus on the after effect. So when I go for a run, I don't think about, my mind doesn't go, oh, I'm going to go for a run. I think about how good it's going to feel afterwards when I get that release of endorphins. And that's the same as when I go to the gym. I don't actually think about what I'm going to be doing. I just take the action. And that's that's the principle. It's always in the actions, not you're thinking like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Habits, there's a really good book about habits called I think it's Atomic Habits by James Clear, and in that book it talks a lot about being able to understanding that once you've formed a habit, it's actually harder to break it. So I've got a habit of waking up and going for a run. I've started that over a year ago. So when I first started, it was very difficult for me to do because my whole body was against it. But when you understand that it's about 30 days or something roughly, depending, give or take, for you to form a new habit, then it becomes, that's all you have to do. You have to think, I'm doing this forever, especially if you never exercised before you start exercising. It's a lot easier to do that. And to be honest, it's actually better if you want to start getting into the body side of things, for you to do something physical probably 7 days a week, even if that means that you do your 5 days of training and you put 2 days where you just do stretching or something that's less intensive, maybe walking, or just having that habit that at a certain time you do a certain thing. It'll be easier to stick to than if you do it maybe 2 days a week or 3 days a week, because you're having a day where you have a break, and that it's hard to get that momentum going. It's almost like your body's like a steam train, so it takes a lot to get it going, but once it's going, it's just a matter of, it doesn't require as much to keep it on that same path. And you'll get a constant boost of endorphins every day, which will elevate your vibration. So obviously keep your value tied in your so don't have all your value tied in your appearance, because you'll see that. So you might see people who you think, geez, that person looks great, but then everything is in how they look, so they don't see themselves having value outside of that. That's not a good place to be, because people get older, they age, so if you have nothing else to offer, then you look. So you've got to try and cultivate other areas where you can provide value or have value in, to build your self-esteem and self-confidence. And measure progress and improvements. So take a photo beforehand, or even start writing things down. I've tracked my stuff down, especially with my runs, just the improvement mindset of being able to just, instead of thinking I want to have this ultimate goal that I don't even know about, I just want to be, and have the goal just something that you can improve on. So it's short-term goals, so something that you can do, measure each month or each week, and track it so that you can see how you're going. The reason being, because if you just say something, if your goal's not really well defined, you probably won't achieve it. If you say, I just want to be fit, I just want to be a weapon, or I want to be real shredded, they're not real goal, but if you say, I want to compete in a hydrox, or I want to do a marathon in 6 months, then you've got something big you're aiming for, and then you can break that down into smaller, more achievable goals. And the more you can break your goals down, the more you can use, your brain releases dopamine when you achieve a goal or you do a task. So you use that, it's almost like, and that's a feel-good feeling, rather than you putting all of your expectations on some far-off event. You'll be able to enjoy the reward. You learn how to enjoy the process rather than just the outcome. And that's really an important thing as well, learning how to enjoy the process with mind, body and soul, every aspect of your life when it comes to building confidence. Because if it's all about an outcome, you're not going to be in the best position to be able to go for that outcome. That's what even basketball players or pro athletes, they all do this, where they practice, and by the time they actually go ahead and do it, they've done it a million times. And I do this even in my head, I'll just even making this video, I've thought about this while I was running, thought of areas I was going to touch on, and throughout the day I've just been writing notes of things that I should touch on when I'm talking about each one of these subjects. So that's me mentally preparing before even doing it. Alright, so move on to the soul now. So probably one of the first things I want to say is that people all have a good side and a dark side in them. some people might not want to admit it. It's actually part of the dark side, pretending that you don't have it. I like to call it the shadow, because as in previous videos, I've used Carl Jung and the archetypes and the shadow is the perfect way of explaining it, with projection and denial. So you have to understand that people are very big on energy, so we're very energy type beings. So that means that, like there's people that I'll call it shadow bonding, so I might catch up with certain friends, and maybe the conversation, it's more of it's almost like scratching that darker side of you. It could just even be through conversations. It doesn't have to be anything extreme, like, getting into trouble or, going into, running amok. But, you've just got to be very mindful that when you're around those people, you're feeding that side of yourself where you want to sort of shrink that and build up the good, like love part of yourself. That's very good, and you do that through spiritual practices, which I've touched on in other videos. Trying new experiences, so that's really good for the soul, because if you get out there and you explore things, like I've done a lot of different things. Like I've been to, I've been a student at UWA, been a student at Curtin University, been to 7 different prisons. I've done sound healing. I've done Toastmasters. I've been to Curtin Business School. I've been to events that are in the western suburbs, like with business orientated events. And when I go into different areas that are outside of my field of comfort, there's fear attached to that. So I've had to, in those situations, I've built my confidence up by just facing that fear, which is the perfect way of, that's how you build your self-esteem and self-confidence, by leaning into it. And what happens is then you start to become versatile, so that you can just talk to people from all walks of life, and you can pretty much adapt to any situation, and that's what you want to try and aim for. Personal values, that's a really big one for soul. So if you cultivate personal values that you live by, that way you can use them to guide your life. So for me, and for what I'm doing with Redemption Inc., the personal values are integrity, compassion, respect, transparency, and authenticity. And transparency is only there because it's, by being transparent about my past, about being transparent about my failures and the things that I'm not proud of and all that sort of stuff. It helps, people who are suffering or going through those sorts of things and not understanding how to fix it, they can then, use that to better their lives. That's what that one means. The reason I've put personal values under the soul side of things is because if your personal values don't harm other people, and they're good, they're from a place of love, then the universe will work in your favor. So if something doesn't come about, if something doesn't work out, then you can this is how you develop a bit of faith. Whatever you're religious, it doesn't even have to be a religious thing. It could just be in the universe, or it's a spiritual sort of thing. It's the human spirit, whatever it may be. If if you're living by those values, then everything will work out. So if something doesn't happen, or something, you can have faith that it wasn't meant to be, and then so what's meant to be is coming for you. And people, it's very easy, because this is how the mind can play tricks on you. Whereas people think, they really put a lot of attachment to an outcome of a situation, not realizing that maybe a better solution was just around the corner. You might not get a job, and it's destroyed your mental well-being, but then it could be that your dream job was just 2 weeks away. So this is really important to be able to develop that. And the other part of the soul as well, this is what I've gained the most, especially from recovery, is your gut's feeling is your source of spiritual truth. So you could, and this is how you can avoid getting yourself into situations that you get talked into, if you get led along. If you're sober and you can trust your gut instincts, so this means where your gut instincts are your feelings, the emotions. If something doesn't feel right, even though it sounds right when you're hearing it, then you can go I'll use my gut over my head, because my head will change. It could be that I really want something bad enough, so then my thinking will just play into it. Whereas if my gut feelings are always on point, and I always trust them. I've learned how to really trust them, and that's something that you've really got to you've got to be able to trust your emotions around things, you know. And I've heard this even when I went at Curtin Business School. This isn't just for people like me. This is like for people that are quite well in the business community. It's like I've heard people say that they've said no on a deal that would have made them 3 times more money than would have ever made in their life, simply because of the fact their gut feeling didn't feel right. And then only to find out a few weeks later that person had been, you know, ended up getting in trouble for committing some sort of financial fraud or something, and it would have completely destroyed everything they've worked up building. So sometimes that's how a lot of people get, you know, and the best way to have that is to always set your intention. You know, so for what I'm doing with my business, you know, my business isn't about making money. You know, like obviously making money is a form of energy and I can do good things with it, and it's also how I want to make a living and, you know, all the rest of it. But my primary intention is to try and help transform people's lives. And then because that's my intention, it magnates people in towards my life who have that similar sort of intention, people that have got a good heart, who want to help out. And, you know, and that filters out the people who maybe just trying to look at how they can make money or exploit, or, you know, because there's a lot of sharks in the world, and it's just how the world is. So you need to be able to really trust your instincts, trust your gut feeling, your intuition. You know, and that's the other thing as well. It's like when you're living a good principle-based life, values-based life, you know, this will help elevate your vibration because it's coming from a place of love. You know, and as I've said before, our mind is great. It's like a great source of information, but it's really shit at trying to actually, if you're feeling like shit and you try and use your mind to fix things, it's the worst way to go about it. You know, like and this is, you know, like my baseline is in a pretty good vibration at the moment, but if I'm having a shit day, if I'm angry, I'm not going to be thinking my best. My thinking's going to be aligned with my feelings, so I need to make sure. So my primary focus is always to get my mind and my body and my soul in check, and then, you know, like then my thinking is going to come into more of a higher vibration, higher level type of thinking. Energy, so that's really important, you know what I mean? So this is part of soul as well. So people don't remember the words, so a lot of times people don't remember exactly the things that you've said, but they remember how you make them feel. And so if you just leave people on a good note, if you lift people's spirits, they appreciate that, and that's what they're like, even leaving a good impression. You know, this is in business, relationships, all those sorts of things. If you just focus on making sure that they feel heard, respected, and this is regardless of if they're, you know, above, you know, actually people that would probably be, you know, I guess, you know, if you're looking at social status and stuff, you know, like if you show a lot of love and kindness to people who you know, maybe, you know, like in a lower vibrational state than you are, that person's going to appreciate that 10 times more than if you were to say it to someone who's right up the top, you know, because everyone does. Everyone tries to kiss ass to people up there, but if you try and be a good person to people down here, that's when you really start to cultivate, and you bring a lot of good karmic energy into it. And karma's a thing as well, you know, like if you fucking do a lot of bad shit, like you gotta pay the price for it. You know, I certainly did, you know, like mentally, physically, all that sort of stuff, and I had to pay my debts. Like I lost pretty much, you know, nearly 6 years in prison, but I was destroyed by addiction. So all the bad shit I was doing, I had to go through the suffering for, and the suffering is how you're paying your karmic debt, you know, when you've created a lot of harm. But the best thing is, as you work through that, and you don't continue putting suffering on others, and you take ownership of everything, and you take responsibility, then you actually work at clearing that karmic debt, you know, that debt that, and then you can create good karma, you know, like if you're doing good things, then good things will come to you. It's just a universal law. Also, another good one for the soul and spirit is to change your outward dialogue, you know. So if you like people that have low self-esteem, people that have, you know, who aren't confident, their brain is working against them. Their mind is working against them. So if you're always, you know, like if you're negative about other people, if you talk badly about other people behind their backs, like you're imprinting this belief system into your head that this is how other people think of you, you know, or this is how. And this is actually the darker part, when I was talking about earlier, the darker part of people's, that they're, you know, like especially people that are suffering, that part is bigger, you know, so you want to try and limit that. So if you become a positive person, if you talk to people with respect, if you like you live by your values, you always you treat people how you'd like to be treated, all that sort of stuff. Like eventually what happens is then that comes backwards into your own head. So then like if you uplift people, you support people, help people, then your own mind starts to run like that. Then your voice in your head isn't like destroying you. It's actually working with you, working for you, and it quietens that part of the mind that you want to try and keep quiet, which is the negative part. So getting back on the personal values, touching on that again, when you're like trying to manipulate a situation, or if you miss out on all the three of these things, and you don't have a belief that in the universe having your back, it's like you're whenever something that fails, or if something doesn't work out, you have to do a lot of failure to try and become successful in life. It's just inevitable. I've failed so much. I've lost count. I've failed a lot more than I've won, that's for sure. But the thing about it is if you're not running all three, the mind, body and soul well, and if you're trying to avoid the fear, this is what a lot of people try and get confidence maybe from drinking alcohol or doing drugs, so they don't feel any fear around things. Like it's inevitably, like that's the worst way to actually deal with fear. It's the most emasculating. Like, so it takes away your manhood when you don't have the ability to be responsible. And that's what substances and stuff do. But if you have all that stuff lined up, and the value and something doesn't work out, well, you can just believe in the universe. But if usually failure happens and you don't have that, and you're trying to control on things, it'll hit you like a ton of bricks because you'll internalize it. Whereas when you cultivate more of a spiritual well-being, you could cultivate like everything else, then you're not going to have that feeling of failure, because you know that you're a good person, and you're a good person by not what you say or what you try and convince others. You're a good person by what you do all the time and how you treat others. So it's always in the action. Everything is always in the action. And when you've got your mind and you've got your body and your soul, and you've got those areas of vibration up good, then your mind starts to work in your favor, and then it becomes from something that's destroying you internally, it becomes something that helps you be able to solve problems, fix issues, and instead of being like taking a victim stance, So for me, it's like I wouldn't, if I'm running rough, the first things I do, I don't like if my inner dialogue is telling me that you're gonna this or that, it starts getting real negative. I focus on my body and then my soul, and then I can my thinking then catches up to the other two, and then I can all of a sudden, from being like, well, this is all shit, to okay, this makes sense. That's why they should say if you have a big issue, you should always sleep on it. I think that's basically everything I've got to so basically just to recap on it before I finish, so fear, just understanding that's a part of building confidence. Like, you have to lean into your fear, it's part of it, and it's also how you build that courage, like building self-confidence and building your self-esteem. It's not from just looking in the mirror, and I've heard this before on podcasts, but it's the truest saying ever. Like, it's not from looking in the mirror going, I'm confident, I'm confident, I'm confident. It's from building up a list of evidence, like a whole heap of evidence that from your past that you can, and it takes time, but then you can look back on that and you know that you've achieved to set out everything you've done. And that's what I've done. Like, so I've done that through like continually taking steps up as I've been working my way up, especially in the vibrations and stuff like that. And then now I've got it, like even when I went to university, so this is a prime example, like that was just one, when I was a teenager, like I dropped out of high school, year 10 I technically dropped out, but I wasn't going to school regularly from the age of 14, and failed miserably at school. And then when I came to me wanting to go to university to look at doing psychology, I ended up wanting to do a bridging course. And the thing about the bridging course was at Murdoch, but I just, on a whim, I just thought I'll do the stat test, and which is like a 3-hour test, and I hadn't done any study, and like at that point in time, I think this was like 3, maybe 4 years ago, so I was like 29, maybe, 29 I was actually, so would have been 4 years ago. I went and did the stat test, and on a whim, and I got 90%, and like that gave me a huge boost in confidence, and like I always drew back from that, like, so it was like all these little, like these things that I did that in the past that made me think, okay, that I've got the ability to do what I'm doing now. Otherwise, it's just, like it's a process, what I'm trying to say. So, and just be compassionate. That's why compassion's one of ours, for where we are. Like, be compassionate for where you are now, and just have faith that if you keep on doing the right things, and if you keep on just chipping away and taking those little steps, it's only a short period of time. Like, time goes like that, I'm sure most people know, like, 10 years ago, it just felt like a click of the fingers, and now it's 10 years. So rather than having time work against you, start using time in your favour by just taking small steps forward. It's not about trying to that's why you should never compare yourself to someone else, where people get into this state of envy, but they don't know what the other person has had to get through or go through to get to where they are now. So it's just that, like they'll have a negative emotion towards someone, and then their mind then has to make up a dialogue to justify why they're feeling that way about someone. And it's like, just look at yourself. It's an internalized thing. Have compassion towards other people, and have appreciation for other people who are doing well, because it's like everyone's the same. People all want the same things in life. Like, they want to live a good life. They want to live a comfortable life. And success might be different for other people, but generally it's a place of happiness and love. And when that's like, it's in those high vibrations. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be successful in business, or you want to take on a lot of responsibility like what I'm trying to do. But, like, it could just mean that you'd want a simple life, and that's perfectly fine. That's like, I think that's the main thing. It's like, it's not about trying to, it's not about material things. It's about living a life that you have peace, you're happy with what you're doing, because you only live one life, you know what I mean? Like, I think resentment is like when you regret is so much worse than having the discipline. Like, I used to hold on to so much regret at one point in my life, and then it's something that I've had to, now I understand though, through that, it's like, even if I have fear, I won't let that control me, because I know that the only thing that would be worse is that one day if I get close to my deathbed, or you don't know how many days you've got, and thinking, I wish I'd done that when I was younger, because you can't turn back time, but you can make time work for you from now onwards, So anyway, I'll stop. I think I've addressed everything that I wanted to say, and I hope you got some valuable information out of this video, and feel free to share it, or all the support is definitely appreciated. Thank you.